Ian Watts. Welcome to Wise About Life. We're coming today from the beautiful Algarve. I'm in Casa Bela Vista here in Portugal, and I wish you were here with me because we could be sitting out in the garden having a nice cool drink in the sunshine. So hopefully one day you'll have a chance to get down here. And
That'll be the part two. The part two will be in the Algarve.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So this is Wise About Life, and I've shared a little bit with you about Wise About Life. It really comes out of the decades of work that we've done on diversity and inclusion. A lot of work is around creativity and innovation and just dealing with complexity and like variability. So for us, diversity was never just about like the identity politics it has come to represent, right? But it was more about how rich diversity is for the lives that we lead and how much it is so fundamental to creativity and innovation and to learning and to growth and to wisdom.
Well, each one teach one. We
There you
grow
go.
on this. We grow on the shoulders of those who've gone before us.
100%, right? And that is also so key to what we do just in terms of the respect for the generational learning and just that, we talked about being on a journey today, having a conversation for, 45 minutes or so, but we're having a conversation on the basis of everybody who's come before us.
Fully 100% agree.
Yeah. And that learning and that wisdom that we've been able to derive from them, and then also from our own personal and professional life experiences that have been shaped and formed by them, is so essential. So essential. So today, we're going to have some time with you as really as a photographer, but you're more than just a photographer, really, aren't you?
I've done a couple of things in my life.
Go on then.
Well, actually, as you may or may not know, I don't know if you know my journey, but I did actually start out as a photographer, but then I kind of, maybe after 10 years or so of working as a photographer, I kind of was looking for new challenges, and I kind of not discovered, I kind of realized that the next stage of my journey was going to be in film and television. So
Mhm.
I made the kind of natural move from still pictures to moving pictures.
Okay.
So from going from relatively the top of my tree, I went back to the beginning, went to film school, learned the film and well, it was film at that time, film techniques, and learned how to work as part of a film crew as opposed to working as an individual photographer. So that was all part of a new learning experience. But
Yeah.
it was something that I embraced because I had a lot of creative energy and I
Hmm.
needed something that was going to take me to the next step of
Hmm.
my journey. And
Hmm.
film and television was the missing link for my life, my creative life. And
Nice.
that's where I've been for the last 30 years.
30 years. That's a
Mm,
good journey. That's a good
mm.
journey. So at the first part of your career, because you said you made the natural choice to swap it up a bit, right? But a lot of people don't swap it up, right? It's not natural for people to make such a significant career change as you did at that time. So I've got two questions for you. One is, what were you experiencing at that moment when you knew that this wasn't enough for you in your life?
I kind of felt that I was at the top of the tree in terms of my photographic journey. I
Mhm.
was sort of talking to top end magazines like Vogue and Newsweek type magazines, the Times newspaper, and I just realized that I didn't really want to work with those people.
Mhm.
I realized that I had reached as far as I wanted to go in terms of my photographic practice, and I
Mhm.
just needed new challenges. And I actually had a friend who had gone to film school, and when I saw what he was doing, I decided that that was an interesting move. And then the more I looked into it, the more I realized that film and television was going to be the next step of my journey, and
Mhm.
it's something I don't regret at all.
Yeah.
But I have to say, there is a natural movement now because when you're a photographer, you're working with lighting, you're working with composition, you're working with lighting lenses, you're still doing essentially the same thing. It's just that you're now working at a slightly different practice, which is
Mhm.
moving images rather than still images.
Yeah.
But essentially, you've still got the same kind of generic history of, you're working in the creative practice, but you're no longer doing still images, you're doing moving images.
Right. And what is the What's the qualitative difference for you as a artistic photographer from the still to the moving? Like what shifts in terms of the when the medium shifts?
Well, the biggest difference is that as a photographer, I was free to do whatever I wanted. When I'm working on films, I'm working for somebody else. So I'm working with a director, I'm working with a producer, I might be working with musicians if it's a pop music video. So it's a very different journey as opposed
Mm,
to doing your own creative practice as a photographer. So the photographs that I took for myself are very different to the work that I did when I entered the film and television industry. So
yeah.
I might be working on sports films, I might be working on documentaries, music programs, but these are other people's journeys, but I'm interpreting their vision and creating images for filming their journey rather than filming my own journey.
Right. So you're the sort of conduit for their vision.
Yeah, I'm the creative conduit though.
Yeah.
I'm not just a passive person on the journey. I'm a
Mm,
very active person on the journey.
mm,
Sometimes you'll work with a director who knows exactly what they want, and other
mm.
times they'll come to you and they'll be wanting more creative input from you in terms of shots, lighting, vision, whatever.
Yeah.
They will rely on your experience. So it depends. You have different types of people who you're working with, and different people have different ways of working. And I think
Yeah.
the skill as a cameraman or director of photography or whatever title you want to call me, I think you have to be a bit like a chameleon and be able to adapt to the nuances of the different people that you're working with.
Yeah, very nice. And that was one of the things I wanted to chat with you about. I mean, I personally love photography as an art form, and I think in my late teens, early 20s, I didn't go anywhere without a 35 millimeter around my neck, because I just loved capturing those moments in time. Um, and but I never really learned how to be a photographer. I just kind of intuited it. I didn't understand the settings and the apertures, and I just sort of like it seems like it's working. Um, but there's something really specific about having the technical skill, but there's also something about the human, the humanity of being a photographer that is so special. I think that's what really drew me to it. What would you say about that in terms of the humanistic skills that you have that make you a great photographer? And what are those skills that we can transfer into just our own lives as everyday people?
Well, I think these days everybody is a camera person and everybody's a photographer because everybody has a mobile phone and everybody can take images. So I think
But wait, hang on a minute. Does that really make somebody a photographer? I mean, there's a thing about being able to take a picture.
anybody can take a picture. That is
Anybody can take a
that
picture,
is reality. Anybody can take a picture. But
but
I
not
guess
everybody's a photographer.
And that's and I think what you're talking about is quite an important point, really, because just like anybody can be can be a driver, but there's only very few Lewis Hamiltons.
Mm,
So I think what separates a great photographer from a regular person is the creative vision.
mm,
It's not just about the history of that person, but it's also what you can interpret. And I
mm,
always make a very strong point that it's not about the price or the equipment that you have. It's the vision that you have that's far more important. It doesn't matter whether the equipment costs 2,000 or 20,000 pounds or even 10 pounds. What
mm,
matters is the vision of the person creating that image, and
mm,
that's what separates the ordinary person from the regular person. It's
mm,
the thought process that goes into creating that image rather than just randomly taking a snapshot, which may be good, may be bad, but I think your your this your thought process to creating that image is so important.
mm,
And the father of modern photography, Cartier-Bresson, he had a phrase which was called the decisive moment. And photography is essentially about the decisive moment. It's about capturing that moment in time. And when you take that picture, is that creating that decisive moment in time, whether you
mm,
take it now or whether you take it 5 seconds later, whether the person's got their eyes open or closed, that's your take on it. I mean,
mm.
there is a little bit of a cheat there in some ways because obviously these days you can take 100 photographs in a minute, but
Right.
essentially, if you're trying to create a creative process, you're looking for that decisive moment in time when the
Mm,
person's just about to walk or not walk, when they're leaning back, they're leaning forward,
yeah.
whether they've got their mouth open, they've got their mouth closed. those are the things that separate you as a photographer who knows what you're doing.
Yeah. And how do you know, how do you break it down, right? That decision-making process. If you were to teach people, like, how do you teach somebody to know when to step into and capture that particular moment that's timeless?
I think you have to be as the type of photography that I do, I think you have to be quite observational. I think you have to look at the scene, you have to watch and you have to observe. And I think it's also about being unobtrusive as well for a lot
Mm,
of the photographs that really create something special.
mhm,
I think, if you're there with your big cameras and big lenses and making lots of noise, yes, you'll
mhm.
get something, but I think you'll get something that's very obvious to the person you're photographing. Whereas if you're more subtle about what you do and maybe allow time and space, then I think you'll get something special.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Ian, talking about the subtlety and the time and the space. And how about patience? Does it take
That's
patience?
that's exactly what I'm talking about. There's the
Yeah.
patience. I mean, sometimes, you feel, I don't know, you're photographing a celebrity or something like that. You may only get 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Then I think that's a different kind of pressure and a different kind of
Mm,
space.
mm,
But the type of photography that we're talking about, I think there's a certain amount of patience. And I think you're building up a kind of a trust between you and the person you're photographing as well. So I
mhm,
think you have to be or give a kind of honesty about what you're doing and your intent. And I think
mm.
allowing time to have build a relationship with somebody is very important. And I think the relationship that you have with your subjects is what helps to create great images as well.
Yeah, and is that the same for still as it is for video? That trust
No.
with the subject?
I
No.
think, well, I'm contradicting myself. I think there is a certain amount of trust because people are being vulnerable, but in a different way, because
Mm,
they're talking and they're telling a story. So I think
mm,
it's very different when you're photographing somebody for stills images as
mhm.
opposed to when you're capturing the story. I think there's
Right.
still a certain amount of honesty and integrity in the work that you do, but I think it's a slightly different relationship because you're just looking for those moments in time as opposed to getting somebody's personal journey
A
for
record or a documentary of
for a
something.
documentary. I think it's
Yeah, yeah,
a different
yeah.
thing, but I think there's a certain amount of overlap as well in
Mm,
terms of creating a kind of honest interaction with the
mhm.
person who you're working with as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sadly, I didn't save many of my photographs from years gone by, and I really loved it. And I was saying to my husband as we were getting ready to chat today, uh, I don't know, I have it etched in my memory, right? But I don't have the black. I used to love black and white. I don't know how you feel on black and white versus color, but I was completely converted to black and white film, Not- and never really took to the digital. I don't get that. Like I liked taking pictures with my left eye. I'm right-handed, but it was my left eye,
Okay,
and I
okay,
loved
interesting.
film. Like there was something about that. Anyway, I grew up in New Jersey, and not far from Newark, New Jersey, in the inner cities. My parents would have grown up in the inner cities, but I grew up in the suburbs. And
Patterson.
my mom used to teach in Patterson, actually. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
know
Yeah.
Patterson. I know Patterson. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and they both grew up in Newark.
Hmm.
And so I remember going down because I went down one day down one of the main avenues, as it got like poorer and poorer and blacker and blacker. And there was like a buildings, it was like a rubble site, I don't know, something had been demolished. And as I was walking down the avenue, I sort of looked into this heap of ruin, and I saw this young black boy standing up against what was an existing wall just by himself, in this lot. And I remember capturing that moment, of his emotion. Like I could tell that he was really in a state of despair. And it was really sad, and he was really lonely, and he was like in and amongst building rubble,
Mm,
in a ghetto.
mm.
And I just had to walk up to him after I took his picture and just ask him, like, how are you? Who are you? And I remember to this day, his name is Joseph. He was 17 years old. He was a twin. He had a twin brother, and he had just failed an exam. Like I could tell he was a smart kid, and he was
Mm.
so wanting to get out of the ghetto. And he was standing in that rubble just crying because he had lost a chance. And that hits me still emotionally today. That was in 1986, I mean, and that was like nearly 40
Well,
years
well,
ago.
But that the question I have for you though is this is a kind of a dilemma you have as a photographer is do you actually take the photograph of that person's anger or trauma or whatever, or do you actually talk to them first and then take the photograph?
Right.
But did you take the photograph first or did you actually
I took the
talk to them
photograph
first?
first. I took it first.
Hmm. I think that was probably the right thing to do because otherwise it would have been a very different image that you would have captured.
Because it wouldn't have been that
Mm.
moment,
No,
right?
exactly. That decisive moment in time, which we talked about
Ah,
earlier.
ah,
You captured that moment in time because you decided that that was the moment in time. But unlike maybe other people, you didn't then take the photograph and walk away. You actually wanted to have an interaction with the person you're taking the photograph with. So I
right.
think that was very important.
It was amazing. And it was, and the trust was built afterwards. The trust wasn't built before.
But they still revealed their vulnerability to you at that moment in time when they were angry, sad and crying about the exam. But I
Yeah,
think the fact that you actually spoke to them just shows your compassion and humanity as well, which is very important as a
yeah.
photographer and capturing images, because lots of times we go into situations, and I've seen it so many times where photographers almost ride like a bulldozer through I don't want to say ghetto, but let's say a ghetto. They go for a ghetto, take all the photographs, and then they're gone, and there's no
Yeah.
kind of interaction. And I guess, I think the expression people have used before is it's kind of like ghetto porn. It's just
Oh,
like photograph poverty and get the shots of the poverty and then go. And I think there's so much of that, which I really hate. I hate that scenario. But
oh.
the right way to do it is the way you did it, and the
Mm,
right way to do it is the way people like Gordon Parks did in the 50s and 60s when he was taking photographs for Life magazine, and he
oh.
photographed people like Red, the gang leader in New York. I
Mhm.
think that is the right way to do it because he built a relationship with the people he was photographing, and that's
Right.
why he produced such great images.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the work that I do in my wider professional field is really looking at extractive practices that are unethical,
Mm,
whether it's
mm,
extracting, whatever, people from places or oil
mm.
from the earth or, photographic images from human beings without their permission, or without relationship and trust. It's all quite extractive. And that is not that to me doesn't have the integrity that is required, I think, in order to really do the proper job. And it's almost it seems like a bit alchemical being a photographer.
Well, and I say we because I know you worked on film, when we were working on film, it is a chemical process. So I think it's a very different kind of way of working to when you're shooting digitally. I think there is that chemical process, whether
Mhm.
it's taking the photograph, getting the film developed, making prints. And it's so different to when you work these days digitally, where it's a very different kind of colder way of working. But I think there is that nice chemical process that you have. It's, as I say, it's like analog and digital. There is that kind of warmth that you get from an analog image, which
Right.
you try to get when you shoot digitally.
I mean, in heaven help us with AI. I mean, there's no warmth in AI. Let the you gone from analog to digital to AI, like warmth out the window. Where's the dark room? When's the last time you were in a dark room?
Very good question. Very good question. Eh, Last century? Certainly haven't been in this century, not at all. No, last century. I
What
think
was
that
it like in dark rooms? Like, if you had to explain to someone who doesn't even know what a dark room is, right? Like, there'll be young people listening to this guy who's
in
just talking about dark.
very you were creating magic in the dark room. You were taking your images, and then all of a sudden you got them, on a little bowl, and you actually produce watching an image come to life. And it's a great experience. It's almost like you're giving birth to something new, to a life. And I think you just don't get that these days because these days you point and click, and then it's there straight away. But I
Mm,
think that kind of gestation process of creating an image physically in front of you creates a
mm.
kind of a bond with you between you and the image that you certainly don't get these days.
Yeah, I love that you say it's a gestation process, right? Because
Mm.
I remember back in the day when we still had film, and you take rolls and rolls of film on your holiday or wherever you went, and then you'd have to bring them back and bring them to the shop. You'd have to wait a week for them to come back, like in a package. And it was like Christmas because you just didn't know how what you shot was going to turn out.
I think that was the joy, but also the horror of taking photographs at that time because you didn't actually have the luxury of taking an image and then having a look at your digital screen to see if the image was there. You
Mm,
literally didn't know until afterwards. And
mm,
sometimes you could never go back and take that photograph again. And a
right.
lot of my early photographs were, say, I was taking photographs of musicians before in performances. And I was actually learning by taking images and finding out sometimes they were great, sometimes they're not so great. But I
Yeah.
couldn't go back and say to such and such an artist, "Oh, can we do that concert again?" Because that moment had passed. So I think it was tough, but I
Mm,
think you also learn very quickly what works and what doesn't work. In a way, maybe you wouldn't if you're doing digitally because you actually make your corrections straight away. Whereas we could analyze and say, "Oh, this image works, this image doesn't work. Oh,
right.
shutter speed, blurry, whatever." I think
Right.
you kind of learn in a different way to what you can do today.
Yeah, because in the past, if it, and this goes into like this whole perfection thing, right? Like everybody's
Mhm.
looking for the perfect photo, but you didn't know if something was going to be perfect until you waited and, either developed it in the darkroom or got it back from the shops, whatever. Um, but there really is something, from perfection. There's also, if it's not perfect, when you get it back, then you learn the next time how to do it better. You don't get better because the equipment gets better or faster, right?
But that's essentially, if somebody says to me, "How do you learn photography?" You learn by making your mistakes. That is the only way. You're not going to learn because you've taken great photo, because everything's perfect. You're going to learn because you look at your work and you see what works and what doesn't work. And
Mhm.
sometimes when an image is maybe not perfect, that in a sense can sometimes be quite beautiful as well because it's not perfect, rather than something 100% pristine or the focus is here or wherever. I think
Mhm.
sometimes, as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and
Yeah.
that kind of non-perfect, non 100% perfection is actually can be quite beautiful sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it makes me think about apples in the supermarket. Everything can be perfectly homogeneously shined and aligned, or you can have the ones that really came from the earth and are a bit wonky this way or that way. And
And that's more interesting. They're more interesting. The more interesting images, apples, are the apples that are not 100% perfect. The ones that have got the kinks in them or the dents in them, they
yeah,
can sometimes be the more interesting images or the more interesting shots.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. I had my Joseph moment. There are lots of moments actually. I've
Your what
actually
moment?
my
Joseph?
Joseph moment when I engaged with the young fella in the rubble site. What's one of your favorite photographs that you've taken when you really felt like deeply engaged with your subject and just the emotionality and the significance is so outstanding for you in your memory?
I think there's quite a few images really, but I can remember taking photographs in Africa of children. Like there's a nice photograph I have of young boys in Accra running towards me on a boat, and the sea is behind them, and that's such a beautiful image that really resonates with me,
Mhm.
and that's something that's special. Uh, I've got another photograph of a young boy in Liberia with a bucket on his head, and that was also quite a nice moment as well. I've got photographs of Rastafarian children in Jamaica. That's also quite nice because the fact that they're not smiling actually makes the photograph. So I think there's lots of things that resonate with me really. I'm
So
not sure if I answered your question.
for each one of those three, what is it about it? Like what's the significance of three boys in Accra running towards you with the sea behind them? Like what is the story that's coming out of that picture for you that makes you feel?
I think the story is that this is unbridled joy on a beach. It's
Mhm.
just like not posed. It's just kids having fun on the beach, and there's a kind of a real kind of genuineness about the photograph. It's not, as I said, not posed. It's just pure unadulterated joy and excitement and fun, and they're having fun. They've just come out of the sea and they're just running around. So I
Yeah.
think it's a genuine photograph. It's not false. It's not like these days people tend to manipulate images or
Mm.
people set up images. That was just pure, maybe luck, but just capturing that great moment in time of
Yeah.
people having fun running along out of a boat, coming from the beach
Beautiful.
on the beach. Yeah.
Yeah. And the boy with the bucket on the head in Liberia?
Again, again, that was taken in Monrovia, and I think he was just standing there. He'd just come from the well or something like that, and he was just standing there. And I just, had to catch that shot. It just looked so nice. It was just a great shot, really. I didn't, unlike you, I didn't talk to him, but it was just a question of that's a great shot. And sometimes you just see great shots and you just want to capture the capture that moment, really. And that was one
Yeah.
of those moments that I thought, yes, that was nice.
Yeah. And those Rasta kids, what did that
And the
signal?
rest of the kids, the rest of the kids was quite interesting because they, usually kids when they are taking photograph or posing, not posing, that's the wrong, yeah, well, I suppose posing, they tend to, smile and do all the rest of it. But what
Yeah.
was great about these kids is that they were scowling at the camera and people, and it was almost like they're vexed with me. And I think that was what made the photograph because they weren't smiling, but they were young, they're maybe 8 or 9, I don't know, something like that. But
Right.
the scowling on their face, was what people find quite amusing about that particular image.
I
So,
love that. What do
yeah.
you think you represented to them that made them scowl at you?
Because they just didn't maybe want to pose for the camera, but I
Uh,
wasn't just photographing them. I was with their parents. I was with the community at the time, so it wasn't like I just parachuted into a place and took photographs and disappeared. I
yeah.
actually spent time with the community, so
Mm.
that's just one of the images. I took loads of images, but that's just one that stands out in terms of you know a photograph that resonates with me because it's against the conventional with against convention of how people pose in photographs. It's
Yeah, yeah.
the fact that they've got a screw face is actually what makes the picture. Yeah.
I love it. I
Mm.
want to see the screw faces. I love to do a screw face
Mm.
myself.
Mm. Sometimes that's what works, rather than the conventional, smiley smiley type shots.
Well, and there you go. We live in a
Mm.
world where you're meant to be happy all the time. Well, you're not going to get it, are you?
Well,
Right?
that's not reality though. The
No.
reality, I mean, the reality for those kids is that it wasn't a smiley environment that they were living in.
Mhm.
They were
Mhm.
living in a rough environment. So,
Yeah, yeah,
why would they want to pose for this foreigner from England come in to take some photographs? Even though I wasn't, as I said, just in there for 5 minutes, I was there for a number of days.
yeah,
But so that is an interesting dilemma when you are. I tend to find a way of being empathetic with the people I'm photographing because I don't
yeah,
like the idea of just doing what I mentioned earlier, of just taking photographs and disappearing. I like to be
yeah.
around for a while so that people
Right.
know what I'm doing and they know a bit about me.
And we're all part of the story, right? Like
Exactly,
we're all
exactly.
subjects to the
Yeah.
story. That, we've talked about that twice, and it made me think about you just finished as director of photography for Live Aid at 40. And there's something, again, my work around corporate responsibility and sustainable development, there's a lot of aid rolling around, trying to, as particularly the global north, trying to make good in the global south, right? When we've had all the decimation over centuries of extraction. Um, and tell us a little bit about what it was like for you working with Bob Geldof and at Live Aid at 40 and being DOP there, director of photography. What were some of the lessons that you learned through those interactions and relationships and that story?
Well, my journey with Live Aid goes back before Live Aid actually started, because Live Aid only happened because of a Kenyan photographer who actually went to Ethiopia in 1983, I believe, and he
Mhm.
went and photographed what was happening in Kenya. Sorry, in Ethiopia. He
Okay.
went and photographed
He was Kenyan, but he went to Ethiopia.
yeah, he's based in Kenya.
Okay.
His name is Mohammed Amin, and
Mhm.
he was a great photojournalist. He was somebody who I would meet from time to time in Africa when I was on assignment in Africa. And he probably ran the best photo agency in Africa called Camera Pix.
Mhm.
And he was photographing, he'd go all around Africa photographing things that are happening. If my memory serves me right, I think he photographed one of the earlier famines in 1973. But
Mhm.
anyway, in 1983,
Mhm.
sorry, there was the first one in 73. He went back 10 years later in 83 and he took photographs. And then he took those photographs to a BBC journalist called Michael Burke. And
Mhm.
when Michael Burke saw those images, he then
Mhm.
went back to Ethiopia. And because of the connection with the BBC, then Live Aid became popular. But had it not been for that Kenyan photographer who took those original images, then people wouldn't know about the famine in Ethiopia. But
Right.
his connection, Michael Burke's connection of being a BBC well-known presenter at the time, that's how the story became big news.
Right.
Otherwise, it might not have been a big news. It would have been just another story that Mohammed Amin had covered in Africa that would have gone unknown and just
Right.
another famine that had gone unknown. But
Right.
luckily, Mohammed Amin managed to hook up with Michael Burke a lot of the credit went to Michael Burke, but it wasn't Michael Burke, it was Muhammad Amin who actually created the original images. But sometimes we don't always get people don't get the props that they deserve.
Yeah, how do you feel about not getting those props there, though? I mean, there's a good and bad side of that story, isn't there?
After Bob Geldof had seen what had happened, the images that Michael Burke had produced for the BBC, which went all around the world, Bob Geldof was so moved by what he saw that he decided to create this movement and said, right, I'm going to call all my mates and we've got to do a concert for all the starving people in Africa, for all the starving people in Ethiopia. So that's how the birth of Band Aid came about.
Mm.
After, I think he saw it in the October of 84. And then in the following year, they organized a concert, which happened in July 85.
Right, because first it was Band-Aid and then it turned into Live Aid, right?
I think the single was in the October, and then
Mm.
the concert was in the following year in July
Right.
85. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, 84 was the single for Band Aid. Yeah, that's right.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's quite interesting for me because when they did the 20th anniversary of the film in 2005, I was involved in that as a cameraman as well. And I was photographing Bono and Bob Geldof and all these various other people. So it's quite interesting to be associated with the Live Aid at 20. And
Hmm.
then it was great to be asked back again in 2025 to do the
Yeah.
Live Aid at 40. So it's
Wow.
nice to have that connection and having uh, done both films really for the BBC.
Well, it's quite a longitudinal study there, isn't there? Right? I mean, for me,
Mm.
I'm also not just a lover of photography, but also a lover of history.
Me
And
too.
I'm
Me too.
incredibly grateful that we had something like Live Aid to bring the
Mm.
awareness. And okay, perhaps our Kenyan friend, say his name again for me. That was
Muhammad Amin. Muhammad
Muhammad
Amin.
Amin.
Yeah.
Maybe Muhammad didn't get all the credit that went to, say, our British guy's name again.
Michael Burke. Michael
Michael
Burke was the
Burke.
British journalist. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some injustice in that because that
Mm.
happens also often on so many accounts. We are that's just the world, right? There's justice in that, there's injustice in it as well. I was saying to somebody just yesterday, I was chatting, I said, the calculus of justice is really difficult. It's really difficult. What an equation.
Well, it's interesting how what's happening now in terms of aid, because you have to think to
Mm,
yourself, could live aid happen in 2025? If there was another famine,
mm,
and the answer is no, it couldn't happen in 2025. And in fact, there is a big, serious famine going on right now in Sudan, and the world is kind of
Like
ignoring what's happening.
Gaza. I mean, what about happening in
Well,
Gaza?
the Gaza is a man-made. That's even worse because that's man-made, a man-made scenario.
Mm.
But there's Gaza, there's Sudan, there's lots of famine going on.
Why couldn't it have been done today, though?
Well, I think the political will is very different in
Mm,
2025. Sorry, in 1985 compared to now. I think people were genuinely interested in. You see suffering, you want to help people. I think
mm,
it's a more selfish attitude now in
mm,
2025 that people don't seem to give a damn, and the political
mm,
narrative has been shaped by people who don't actually care about
mm,
suffering. They don't care about people starving,
mm,
and I
mm,
think it would be very hard to sort of say, right, call up, the Rolling Stones and call up, whoever to come and do a concert, call up
mm,
James Brown, call up Michael Jackson. You can't
mm.
do that anymore. I think it's just a different world now.
Yeah,
You
and
just
and
you can't do that anymore.
no, and sadly, it's almost so commonplace. And there's an irony in what we did 40 years ago being called Band-Aid because it was just like it's just a Band-Aid, right? Like it's
A plaster, yeah,
it's
it's a
just a
plaster.
plaster.
And it
You're
was a
not healing the
great play
issue.
on words, a great play on words, because it was a bandage to actually help heal,
Mm,
a problem, an injury, So that
yeah.
was a great choice of words, really.
It was a great choice of words, but when you look at the root causes to the illnesses that exist, of our humanities, band-aids aren't quite enough, are they?
No, it's just a sticking plaster over something that needs something much bigger to resolve an issue, to resolve the
Yeah.
problem. That's not going to solve any issues at all, a
Yeah.
band-aid.
Yeah. As a photographer, like what's the riskiest position you ever put yourself into to capture that definitive, decisive moment?
The risk, I mean, sometimes I've been in situations where there's been uprisings and riots and bottles throwing and things like that. And I think I'm not interested in being a hero in terms of risking my neck just to get a photograph. I think there are some photographers, war photographers, who are very brave and could do stuff like that. And
Hmm.
I'm not really
You're
chasing
not that
that.
guy.
I'm not that guy. I mean, I'll capture images and I'll go into situations and I am one of those people when the danger is happening, I will walk towards the danger, but I have my own sense of what is safe and what is not safe. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to do anything which is going to be too foolhardy.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm just trying to think.
Heart palpitation.
When I've taken a photograph and what's created heart palpitations.
Mm.
Sometimes it could be something simple, like maybe, I don't know. I mean, this is not a good example, but maybe going to photograph Grace Jones and not knowing what to expect could be heart palpitations, but maybe that's the wrong kind of heart. That's the
Photographing
wrong
Grace
that's
Jones is
the
risky.
that's the wrong kind, really.
You're still having that sense of I don't know what's
Yeah.
gonna happen here, and like I don't know, like what's this going to turn into, and will my name be behind this photograph, and is that how I want to be represented as a professional?
I think that is the thing though, as a photographer, you are putting your quote unquote professional neck on the line every time you go and do an assignment. And there is that kind of pressure,
Mm.
about heart palpitations.
Mm. A pressure and a responsibility, it sounds like you're very aware of having.
Yeah, but I kind of love it as well. At the same time, it's I kind of thrive on that adrenaline. You get the adrenaline drive, the
Mm.
creative juices get going because you know you've got a job to do.
Mm.
So although you've got an apprehension or nervousness or whatever, you've also got that drive to say, this is a challenge. I'm going to make something work. And that's
Mm.
what you do. You make it work, even though at the time you go, oh my God, how am I going to make this interesting?
What about now, like as director of photography, we've done Live Aid at 40, and you have a BAFTA award, right? For
Three.
three now.
I've got three films that have won BAFTA awards, but
Give us your three. Come on,
uh,
you know them by heart.
I don't actually, because I don't. You see, the thing is, having awards is great, and I think it's nice to have the recognition by getting something like BAFTA awards.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, does the BAFTA award get you work? Not always in my case. I haven't found that.
Mm. Mm.
So to me, it's whether you can do a good job.
Yeah.
When I'm photographing Bob Geldof and all these other people in a small room, it's not the BAFTA award doesn't help you like those people. What makes you
Uh,
like those people is your skill. So that what's
mm.
important to me is whether you can do the job rather than whether
Mm.
you have the BAFTA award, because people go, oh, he's got a BAFTA award and he didn't make it look interesting. No. So the BAFTA award, yeah, it's nice to have that, but that's not the that's not what defines you really. It's nice to have that recognition, but at the end
Ex-
of the day, can you do the job is what's more important.
Yeah.
What are you like as a
Yeah.
human being? Can you actually talk to people? Can you work with people? I
Mm.
find that's the more important qualities rather than the awards. Sometimes the recognition is when somebody looks at the photograph of the rest of the kids and goes, that's a great photograph. That to
Mm.
me sometimes means a lot more than, other things.
Some jury or
And
panel
and what you're like
decree.
as a person, that's what people
Mm.
I like. Is, what are you like as a human being?
It's
Can you work with people? I think that's a better quality rather than having something, you can have 20 awards, but you're a horrible person to work with. No, it's
mm,
what gives you personal satisfaction. And that
yeah.
personal satisfaction might have been talking to that 17-year-old in New Jersey. That's
Yeah.
probably what affirms your life more than whether you got an award for that photograph. What affirms you is whether you liked that photograph, and that's what's important. Did you like that photograph? Was that
Yeah.
important? The photograph important? I think
Yeah.
that's what I like.
Yeah. It's an award and a reward, right? Like how
Yeah, exactly.
do those
And
demonstrations.
and I'm sure the same for Mohammed Amin when he took those photographs of the kids in Ethiopia, or not kids, the families that starving in Ethiopia. He wasn't looking about a UNESCO award, although I think he did get something. He was looking about making a story be
Mm.
public. That
Mm.
was what was important for him. He
Mm.
wasn't taking the photographs thinking, oh, I'm going to take this because I know I'm going to get an award. No, you're
Yeah.
taking that photograph because you've got an important story you want to tell.
Yeah, this is it. The passion, the integrity. I mean, I know
Mm,
you said once, that you don't get successful overnight. So many people are looking for
not
that
at all.
moment, and that flick the switch on and,
No, it doesn't
20 years
happen like
old
that.
and I'm not a billionaire yet. I'm insufficient as a human being. I was like, what? No, you have to actually work hard at something, build a craft. Do you think you'll get to the top of your tree with being director of photography? And then think that there's something else to do besides that? Like another courageous, bold career shift?
Well, I can say this, which is not really going to necessarily be a surprise to you, that I'm now going on a 360 journey. And so, as you know, I started out in photography, then I spent 30 years working in film and television, and I'm slowly getting back into my photography. Not when I say getting back to it, I never gave up photography, even when I
Mm.
was doing other stuff. But my focus now is not about getting another BAFTA.
Mm,
My focus now is actually getting my photographs out because a lot of my photographs are still largely unseen. So
mhm,
I have an archive of thousands of images that I took over the years,
mhm.
and I am now realizing, or friends have told me that why are you not letting people see the archive of images that you have? So over the last 5 years, I've been digitizing images, and my goal or my journey now is not about film and television as much. It's more about letting people see my work, and that's what
Yeah.
I'm working on at the moment. So I actually want my images to get out there, and that's what's important for me now. I want people to see the work that I have done,
Uh,
because I think they'll be, not I think, I know they'll be surprised because people have said that when I've done other stuff so far.
yeah. I'm really excited to see what you have in that vault, Ian.
Many
That's
people are, and the thing is, a lot of them are, as I said, the sad thing is that I haven't actually put them out for public display, and
hmm
I've been wary about doing some of the images I have
hmm
because I've been ripped off in the past with some of my photographs. So it's
hmm
kind of made me cautious about how I get my images out there because I don't like being ripped off, and I've had that experience in photography. And that was one of the reasons why it turned me away from photography as well, because I
Right.
had lots of nice images and people were ripping me off for some of my
Shoot.
images. And these were not all small people. Some of them were big people as well.
Yeah, and that is before AI has become so prevalent, I imagine.
Exactly. Yeah, wasn't around at that time, of course.
Oh,
Mm.
so what's your strategy to protect your IP or your creative?
Well,
Let's call it creative intelligence.
well, I don't know about so much about the strategy. I think the point is to get the images out there and people to know
Mm,
the work that I have. I
yeah.
know that there will be some people who will still rip me off or make copies of my work, but at the
Mm,
end of the day, I've got to take a decision as to whether I actually let people see my work, and
hmm
that's the bigger picture now because I don't want people to be talking about my images by somebody else. I need to tell my story in my own words and explain the reasoning behind the Rasta girls, the Rasta
Yeah.
kids, you know
Yeah.
what, and I need to explain about the kids in Ghana or whoever
Mhm.
it is. I need to tell that journey,
So
tell that story
you love kids. Like whenever you talk about Africa in photographs,
because
like
I think there's something about the innocence that you find in
mm,
people. There's a freshness that
uh,
you don't, that's not so jaded.
mm.
I've got nice photographs of lots of interesting characters, shall we say, in Jamaica as well, not kids, so there's lots of stuff that I have.
I have one funny question for you, and I don't know if
Mm.
this ever has an impact on your life. Speaking of famous people, you have the same name as Sade's husband, Ian Watts.
Yes,
Like,
yeah,
what,
and
does that
it's
ever
not.
mess you up? Or do you
It's
ever use
funny because
advantage?
even the other day, somebody quite well known contacted me, a friend of mine, and he said, "I didn't know you and Sade were an item before," and I go, "Nor did I." But it's nice to be associated with Sade, and she's somebody who I have photographed in the
Oh, you
past.
have.
Oh yeah, and I've got some nice photographs of her, and she's somebody, I'm sure we could have had a good conversation if she had been interested in me, but no.
Anything else that comes to mind for you when we think about wise about life or some of the joys and pleasures and like if you had to say to people talking about being genuine, talking about having passion, talking about having patience, like what's your advice to us to stay in the good lane?
Um, in terms of being passionate about your work, I think the way to go about it is just by keep taking images. And this is talking about how to improve, I guess.
Mm,
Just keep taking photographs. Don't give up. When I made the move or the transition from photography to film and television, a lot of people were saying to me, why are you moving out? You've done well in photography. Why are you moving out? But no,
mm,
if that's your goal and that's your drive, then do it.
mm,
But
mm,
don't do something because of the so-called glamour or anything like that. Do it because you want to do it. I know lots of people these days are seduced into becoming, I don't know, what do you call them, social media activists and TikTok followers or creators and stuff like that. I think
mm,
people do it because they see the perceived glamour. But no,
Mm,
I think if that's your goal, fine. But don't
mm,
do something just because you think it's going to make you famous or whatever. Do it
yeah,
because that's your drive and that's your passion, and then you'll be more successful. And I think
yeah,
the reason why I was successful in film and television is because I was very driven into what I wanted to do, and it was
yeah,
very important. I didn't actually have any other option other
yeah,
than wanting to be successful in film and television. And
yeah.
I think I've enjoyed my journey. The other day I was sitting down to look at things and I thought, well, I've done quite well. I've
Mm,
enjoyed one of the things I like about the film and television world is the travel, So I've
yeah,
traveled in many parts of the world, more than 50 countries around the world,
mm,
and whether East, North, South, East, and West Africa, most parts of the Caribbean, in Europe, the Americas, South America. So it's been interesting on the journey that I've had. And
mm,
there's been some great films and there's been some not so great films.
yeah, yeah,
But one of my passions is athletics. And
mm.
so I've actually been quite fortunate to have made 3 films with Usain Bolt. And that doesn't get any better than that for me.
Wow.
Filming Usain Bolt in his prime in
Whoa.
Jamaica
Oh, what?
with Michael Johnson as the presenter,
Oh, come on.
that still stands the test of time as one of my,
Well, for sure, when I
yeah.
asked you like a little while ago, what's the one thing that stands out for you most? Your mo that's your Joseph moment, right? Like working with Usain Bolt
Well,
at
Usain Bolt definitely would
prime.
be one would be out there, definitely. I think
Yeah.
Usain Bolt. I also worked with Michael Jackson as well. That would also be another moment as well. So I guess there's a few really, but certainly those two stand out in terms of, yeah.
But it's greatness, right? You get to be in the presence of greatness with your own great, but you don't put your greatness ahead of yourself.
Not at all. And sometimes as I said, I've only mentioned these celebrities at the end of the conversation, but
Mm,
sometimes it's about photographing ordinary people in ordinary worlds and ordinary lives. And
mm,
sometimes that's probably more interesting, getting those little snapshots into people's lives, whether
mm,
you're filming in a village in the northern Nigeria, or whether you're filming somebody in Scotland, or whether you're filming somebody in, I don't know, Los Angeles or wherever.
mm,
Or Senegal. These are the kind of interesting things that I like about my work, that you're transported into worlds and you have, privileged access into lives that you wouldn't normally get to do and see. So
mm,
that for
mm,
me is what I like about the work. Yeah, it's
mm,
nice when you meet Sades of the world, but
mm.
sometimes it's nice to meet regular people as well
Oh,
and have a journey with them. That's
yeah.
what I like. I like that part of the world as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Great stuff. Thank you so much for your time and just sharing your thoughts, your experiences, your journey with us. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. You and I met during the lockdowns. And I've always just really appreciated your openness and your willingness to collaborate, right? Like it was like you were so game on. It's like, yeah, if you can connect with someone and we know we have a common set of values or that sense of integrity or the trust that's there, is really exciting. I had no idea that when we first met a few years ago that it would culminate in just us having this chat now and me creating Wise About Life, and we can share us through this medium with people. So I'm truly, truly grateful to you, Ian Watts, for you being you and the time today together.
I'm honored, Jude, that you wanted to talk to me. I really appreciate it. And it has been a nice journey with you over the years. And thank you very much for inviting me to have this conversation. It's been
Yeah.
a pleasure, and hopefully there's been something useful for you.
Oh, 100%. And not just for me, but for
Mm.
everybody who's listening as well. So I'll keep you posted.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.